Greetings and welcome to Drawing Basics, a series of tutorials about the basics of drawing. Now that we've studied 2D shapes and 3D shapes and value, it's time to put what we've learned to the test in a real-time demonstration. I encourage you to grab your pencil and paper, or pen and tablet, and draw with me for the next little while. I'm Charlie, I'm glad you showed up, and we're gonna make some art. Alright, so we talked about 2D shapes, we talked about 3D shapes, we talked about value a little bit. Let's actually try to put all these things together and do a complete drawing from beginning to end. So here we have a lovely screenshot of Fives. This is not his whole head, but it was plenty. There was some nice lighting on this image, so that's partly why I chose it, and also to pick someone familiar. But we're not going to be learning how to draw faces or anything like that. We're still going to do the same thing. We're going to think about the shapes and the shadows and the highlights and shade, all of that stuff. So we're not going to draw this image. We're actually going to draw this one, which is now in grayscale and also upside down. Why did I flip this upside down? Well, it helps me to stop seeing this image as fives, as a human face, which are intimidating things to draw, and see it more as shapes, because my brain isn't used to seeing a human head upside down. So something else I'm going to do for myself really quick to help me do this drawing is get a square that is roughly the same size as my subject matter. Okay, so we've got a transparency mask. I changed the background of the area that we're going to be drawing on, so I can't draw outside of this square. This will also help me judge about where things are supposed to be in comparison to the image that I'm working from. Okay, so we've got Fives here. He's upside down. He's desaturated. Let's start looking for some shapes and go from there. Got his forehead. There's a shadow. He's got an eyebrow. The eyebrow is most definitely a shape. And I'm going to turn his grumpy brow into a shape. That's a pretty clear shape right there on the side of his head. Okay, so let's actually finish this eyebrow before we get too far ahead of ourselves. And then his hair. A little line there. And then a curve. Okay. Maybe let's do the top of his nose next, which is kind of looking like that, like a rectangle. And then the bottom of his nose, maybe. It's kind of got a little pointed part to it there. And there's that. That's all one value almost, so it makes it easy to spot that as a shape. He's got a nostril on this side. There's another one on this side. On the other side. It's wider at the end than it is closer to the nose. Okay. What next? How about we follow this cheekbone line down that way. The bottom of his jaw. That connects with his ear. Oop. We're doing this on one layer, so I can't erase. Which was a mistake on my part, but it's okay. We'll get through it. I have committed the classic digital artist error already. Okay, so I'm looking at this jawline, and what I've put down doesn't feel right. I think this part of his head is too long, so I'm going to move some of these lines up. Make that kind of longer. I can sort of see this relationship here between that point and that point. Okay, so that feels a little better. I'm gonna pretend erase that by just painting with the background color. Okay, so that was another shape. His mouth area seems to fit inside of a shape that looks roughly like that. And his beard, it's got these two little swoopies in it. And then that meets his mouth. You only see some of the other side of his face, so that's a lot smaller. But that will help us place his cheekbone and the rest of his eye there. Alright, so already, if we look at how much distance there is between the side of his head there and how much distance there is between the side of his head there, which we can actually measure digitally if we want to really quick. I'm just going to drag this over here. My drawing is already much wider than it should be, but it looks good on the other side. So I'm gonna take advantage of the digital tools here and just select this side of his head and move it over. Which is going to look weird because I am drawing on the background like an idiot. But that's okay. We will fix it later. Just drop some of these other ear shapes in there. Okay. We can see the bottom of his eye. It's like a half circle. There's another one on this side. And there's this shadow there that can kind of help me figure out where the edge of that bottom lid is. There's another shadow there that'll help me find the mouth in a bit. Okay, so the eyes are very trapezoid-like. Just place one side, then the other side, and then connect them. That angle is wrong. Okay, then the iris is a circle. Do the same thing over here. The eye is a very similar shape, just a trapezoid. Okay. And it looks like there is more I don't have that shape on mine. So his eyes are probably too high, which we can check by just drawing a straight line. Nope, they look good. So that must mean that his eyebrows are in the wrong place. And they are indeed. So the eyebrows need to come up. So let's fix that. Which will also mean that his nose needs to get taller. Make that shape a little longer. Get that back in there. Before I do the eyebrows, let's focus on that shape that we highlighted. That kind of goes around the eye and under the eyebrow. And the top of that shape will define the bottom of the eyebrow there. Like that. Eyebrows, just some triangles. We'll do the same thing on the other side. Use the top of that shape that we found as the bottom of the eyebrow. Okay, so that's most of his face. Just looking back and forth here, kind of checking a couple of things. I want to check the distance there. Or way too far out. Oops, not what I meant. and also too far down. Also gonna check this again. Put that back. So that's where his ear should be. Alright, so let's just go ahead and use our tools again. Okay. Just shore up some of these lines. It's okay if they're messy right now. Okay. This also looks to be coming out a bit too far. Alright. Let's do the mouth. Got a bottom lip. Top lip, which should pretty much be like under the nose. Okay, so our mouth is in the wrong spot. This is about where we want that to be. The Cupid's bow, I believe it is called. So we're going to draw the mouth again. Using that as an anchor point instead. Bring his goatee up a little bit further. Okay. Just get a general idea of that in there. Alright, so let's give him a neck. Here. That more or less. There we go. Okay, so we've got a messy sketch here. Now because I'm a dum-dum and I was drawing directly on top of a background, let's, on a new layer, just lower the opacity on the sketch layer we just did. Let's kind of clean up our sketch at the same time, but also transfer it to its own layer just by tracing and refining some of the lines that we've got here, which shouldn't take too terribly long. We do not need it to be perfect. We're giving ourselves a guide, base for how we're going to shade as well. I'm going to take this opportunity to modify things a little bit to maybe make them a little more accurate, more on model. Still feel like his head is too wide, but it will probably still look like 5s at the end. And I'm going to save his tattoo for the very end. Okay, chugging along here. Getting down all these shapes. Making changes as we see fit. Got one eye to do. Okay, so now let's get rid of that. And maybe we'll just put some straight lines over the top of that, just to remind ourselves where we're going to be working for the most part. And now let's add some kind of visual notes for some of these shadows. Because they will help us when we go to shade, which we will be doing shortly. Okay. There's the side of his nose. And that shadow really shows off the three-dimensionality of that part of his face. And then he's got this shadow from his hair. And I feel like we can probably handle the rest of that. His nostrils there. Maybe just a triangle right there. Okay. Okay. So, in order to shade this, I'm gonna make a new layer. I'm gonna put it under my sketch layer. I am going to actually fill this with like medium gray really quick. And I'm not gonna use that brush. Why am I filling this with medium gray? Well, when we're drawing traditionally, you're working on a white piece of paper. I don't want to be staring at a white piece of paper while I'm working on a screen because it hurts my eyes. So I'm going to put down this roughly medium gray color as a base to work with. And shade using white and black. Okay, so there's that. I'm using a grainy chalky brush that doesn't change in size but does change how dark it gets with how much pressure I'm putting down. And I can build up layers with it It was the closest thing I could find that was sort of like an actual pencil. Okay, so let's first look for the darkest areas, which I right away identify it as his hair is dark because it is black when we're looking at it in color. Okay, that area is dark. Where's another big chunk of dark area? Under his nose is pretty dark. His beard is definitely dark. Okay. Kind of the corners of his eyes and also under his eyes. There's not very much light getting there. And our light source am I painting on my sketch layer? No, I'm not. Okay, good job, me. The light source in this instance is sort of behind him, because our highlights are on these parts of his face that are pointing up. Okay, just sort of filling in some shadow areas here, generally. Because we don't have to be super detailed right away. We start more broad, and then we work our way towards more detail. His lips are also darker. Identified a shadow there. And then his neck. It's kind of dark. Okay. So, get some shadow on there. Okay, so now that we added some dark areas, let's add some light areas. So I switched over to white, and the top of his nose is very bright. This part is bright, some highlight there. The side of his mouth is fairly bright. Some highlight down there. We found that little guy. Top of his ear is quite bright. Maybe a little highlight on the side of the chin there. This chunk, that's very bright. And then, even though this part is very bright, this chunk right here is still lighter than where his tattoo is on the side of his head. So we're going to brighten that up. Okay. We've got his cheek. It's fairly bright. This part of his face, when I look at the value that's there, this seems to be about a medium gray, so I'm going to leave that alone. Okay, and then his eyes, because the sclera, the white of the eye is white, we're going to want to lighten those up a little bit, but they're not perfectly white. The eyeball is still a sphere, so it's still kind of round. And then we can add in the rest of the eye. There. And highlight just for fun. Okay, so just looking at this now, we haven't even really done that much. We just added some dark areas and some light areas. This already looks a lot like fives, which is pretty fun. And we can keep going with this. Oh, we totally forgot his eyebrows. We can keep going with this and adding more and more fine details to more match our reference material. By looking more and more closely at what's going on in certain areas. So just for fun, I'm going to highlight. Let's just look at this area right here. I'll go ahead and zoom in for this. Got my chalky grainy brush, I'm back on the black. Okay, so he's kind of dark next to his eye. There's going to be shadow under his bottom lid. And we're going to darken that line there, and then it's dark under the eyebrow because the eyebrow has volume still. And Fives kind of has, he's got eyelashes, and those are kind of dark on top there. And I'm pretty sure I just did that on the wrong layer as well. So I'll go ahead and merge those together. And that's pretty much all we're doing from here on out, is looking at smaller and smaller chunks of area and comparing them to our subject matter. Now that we have those big chunks in, it's much easier to work from those big chunks than it is trying to just start in a small area and go from there. Okay, so I'm going to use the color picking tool to pick up colors that look about right, or shades that look about right, and then use those to lay down more color where I'm already working. And the more I do that, the more I go back and forth, the more smooth everything will look. If that's your goal. That doesn't have to be your goal. This was kind of more just a way to practice shading. This looks a little too dark to me. Lighten that up. We're kind of missing the other side of that cheek there, which is kind of like the edge of a cylinder. overall side of his face can be darker. It's kind of a thicker shadow there. Pay a little more attention to his ear. And his hair has some highlights too. You can kind of cheat and make that look a little bit like hair by just drawing in some lines like that. Give his hair some volume. And the eyebrows even have like this teeny tiny, there's kind of a little bit of a highlight there. There's also a nice bright highlight right there on the nose, which will make that part of the nose stand out a little bit over there too, and give it more depth. Because it's brighter, it looks like it's coming out more in comparison to what's around it. That contrast helps it stand out. Okay. And then maybe just a little highlight on the lip. See another pretty good highlight there. All right. His tattoo is not completely black, so let's find about a dark medium gray. And my already squarish brush should help with this. And the tattoo is of course not on a flat surface, so it should bend with his face there. And if it's not quite right, just come back in with a different color and call it good. Okay, so we spent this whole time just drawing upside down. Let's flip the canvas over, and I'm just going to rotate us around here. And that's not bad. That's pretty good. Definitely a good way to get started, especially if you want to draw people or things that you can't unsee as faces. Turning the object upside down is very helpful. Now that we're looking at these upright, we can kind of see and evaluate some areas that are like not looking quite right. Like his cheekbone is a little too far out, I would say. This should be more curvy. That side of his lip. And then his chin is at more of an angle than we ended up doing. But it still looks like fives. Hopefully that was helpful to see some of this in action, especially digitally. And these kinds of things that you did here are helpful further down the line when we're actually working in color as well. And we're done. Sadly, this is the last video in this Drawing Basics series, but it does mean that we are ready to start broadening our drawing skill set with the knowledge that we've got a decent base supporting us. There's more to learn, and we'll tackle it one simple thing at a time. If you have any questions or suggestions, leave a comment below. I hope this was helpful, and thank you for watching.